never wanted to be a hairstylist. I went to junior college to become a fashion merchandiser, whatever that means, and I lasted one semester. I did terrible in school. They actually tested me when I was in the fourth grade because my teacher at the time was like, what the hell's wrong with this girl? I couldn't focus. I day dreamt in class. I never handed in homework. And I requested my files from my school district a few years ago, and it was really interesting. And what they determined from all that testing was that I was learning disabled, whatever that means. I mean, it was the 70s. And through my own research, I realized I had ADD or ADHD and I was dyslexic. So, no wonder I thought I was dumb. I'm not dumb. So I decided I would go to beauty school, thinking, I'll just do this until I figure out what I really want to do as a career. The interesting thing is, my boyfriend at the time, big jerk, said, you can't be a hairstylist. You're too shy. You have to talk to people. Screw that jerk. He's gone. He's long gone. And I hope he's old, fat, and ugly. Sorry, getting off track. So within the first week of going to beauty school, I realized I really like this. I love the creativity of it. I can talk to people. I just talk about their hair. And then I learned how to do small talk. And the interesting thing is in 1990, I got a Pell Grant to pay for beauty school. It was $4,600 at the time. I think it's a lot more than that now. And I was good at it. I took to learning how to do hair quickly. I thrived in beauty school. And then when I got out, the first salon that I went into, I looked like I was about 12 years old when I was 20, and nobody trusted me. I was brand new. I looked like a baby. And I ended up going to JCPenney's styling salon and working there for a couple of years. I really liked that place. I worked with some amazing people. They're still my friends now, all these years later. While I was working there, my mom suddenly passed away. I was 21 years old, and it was a really difficult time. Ironically, I don't know if it's ironically, but at the same time, that's where I met my ex-husband. He was a manager in the women's department in the store, and I worked in the hair salon. And I don't think we were actually supposed to be dating. And the store manager was a jerk. He actually pulled me into his office once for my dress code, where I was wearing something nice, but it looked like shorts. It was like these flowy rayon culottes or whatever. And he sent me home. And this was right after my mom passed away. And it was on that drive home that I thought, fuck this place. I'm not working here anymore. So I went back to the cosmetology school that I graduated from and started instructor training. And I think about it now, and it was a little shady because in the state of Iowa at the time, you had to have 1,000 hours of training before you could get your instructor's license. And they said, you know what? We'll let you do your training for free. And you know what my training was? I just started teaching immediately. I was the level 1 instructor, basics. So I had my own classroom. And when cosmetology students started their training, they spent their first 8 weeks with me. I taught them the basics of styling, hair cutting, color application, rolling a perm, braiding, how to wax eyebrows, color analysis. And mind you, I had just graduated from there maybe 2 years before that. I was like 21, 22 years old, and I was teaching students that were my classmates in high school, and they had to call me Miss Kester. So when I graduated and got my instructor's license, my salary for that position was $10,000 a year. And then after a few months, I got a raise and it was $11,000 a year. Mind you, I was working more than 40 hours a week and I was teaching students all of the basics. But the best part about that job is that's where I really learned how to do hair. If you have to teach someone how to do things, it gets drilled in there. So through that process, I really understood what I was doing, how the mechanics of hairstyling, haircutting, all of it really works. It made me a much better hairstylist. While I was in that job, I obviously was still dating my boyfriend at the time, is now my ex-husband, and he decided to move back to his hometown in western Nebraska. He said it came to him in a dream that he needed to go back home and that he was going to find a job there and then I would move out there with him. After about 5 months of us being apart, there was no headway on the me moving out there. So I decided to take it upon myself to just move there, which is why did I do that? Why did I do that? I absolutely hated living in western Nebraska in my 20s. And honestly, I don't think my boyfriend at the time really enjoyed me being there either. But when you're young, you're stupid. At least I was. Not saying all young people are stupid. I was stupid. So I worked in a school in western Nebraska as an instructor. I was miserable there, so I decided to break up with my boyfriend and move back to Iowa. This is like a year and a half in, and I can't even remember why, but I thought maybe I should move to Omaha, Nebraska. I had a friend that lived there, so I stayed with her and I got a job at Glamour Shots. Do you remember Glamour Shots? Well, I was the hair and makeup person in a Glamour Shots. Granted, it was only for about a month because I had no business being in Omaha, Nebraska. And my boyfriend called me one day and said, quote, "I hate to admit this, but I can't live without you." And I thought that was so incredibly romantic. So I moved back to western Nebraska again, and we decided that we should move to Colorado together. Now we're in the mid-90s. Thought because my cosmetology license was originally from Iowa, and then I moved to Nebraska and worked, I let my original license lapse, and my license in Nebraska was current. And now I was trying to get my license in Colorado. I think it took like a year of like them saying, we need this document, we need that document. And it was quite a runaround to get my license active in Colorado. So in that time frame, I worked display in JCPenney's, and I really liked that job. I dressed mannequins. I did all the displays in the department store. It was really fun, but I missed doing hair. Then I got a job in another department store hair salon. It started out as Jocelyn's, and then Dillard's bought them, so I worked in the Dillard's hair salon, which was a great job. One of my best friends to this day was a fellow stylist there. This was in Longmont, Colorado, and after working there for a few years, I realized that I could make a lot more money if I drove 12 miles and started working in Boulder, Colorado. My haircuts in Longmont were $12, and if I worked downtown Boulder, it was $42 in a high-end salon. So I started in a high-end salon right off of Pearl Street in Boulder, Colorado. What a great time in my life that was. I was in my mid to late 20s, no kids. I was married by then and had, this really fun group of stylists that I work with that, we all became fast friends. We would have sleepovers at each other's houses and stay up drinking all night. And that was a fun time. But I was getting into my late 20s and I wanted to be a mom. So my husband and I started trying for kids, and I finally got pregnant. While I was pregnant working in that salon, the owner was a guy, you know, I don't know, he was in his late 40s probably. I don't know how old he was. You know, when you're in your 20s, anyone past 40 looks like they're 70. So I have no idea how old he was. But having a pregnant hairstylist in his salon, he didn't understand. I standing all day long, my ankles started to look like coffee cans. I was getting preeclampsia, and so as most salon owners do, they come and go as they please, but you have to be there the whole time that you're scheduled to be there in case a walk-in comes in. So when he would leave at the end of the night, I would leave too because I was very pregnant and very tired. Well, the receptionist told him that I was leaving after he left. He took me into his office and yelled at me, "How dare you?" And as an emotional pregnant woman, I just started crying and I couldn't stop crying. And he tried to calm me down, but his way of calming me down was to talk about the critter in my belly. That's what he called it, the critter in my belly. Um, it was at that moment I thought, there's no way I can work here and be a mom. This guy does not understand. So I think the week after that, ironically, I went for one of my checkups, and the doctors told me that I needed bed rest, partial bed rest. I could work for a few hours a day, and then I needed to go home and be horizontal. So I gave him that note, which I could tell he was like, uh-huh, yeah, sure. So I did that. I would work for a few hours. This was like the last month of my pregnancy. No, it was like when I was about 7 months pregnant. So I did that, worked part-time. And I remember the last day I worked there, I had a blowout, which is, someone with really curly hair, one of their hair blown dry straight. My feet were just burning. I mean, I look like Fiona when she was green on Shrek. I had like ankles like coffee cans. I was like, this is my last appointment. And the girl was a bitch. I mean, she just didn't understand. And, and I think back now, it's like I should have just put my brush down and said, somebody else finish this. I mean, what did I have to lose? I was quitting, but I didn't. I finished her, went home, laid down, and waited to be a mom. And during that time, I knew that I still wanted to do hair. I didn't want to work in a salon anymore. So my husband took one of our spare bedrooms and we turned it into a salon. I had clients while I was working in that salon ask me, it's like, can I still get my hair done by you? I mean, I will come to your house. I mean, it was their idea, it wasn't mine. And finally, after so many people saying that, I'm like, okay. So I had this salon in my home with a newborn baby, and it actually worked out pretty well. I just did a few people a day while my son, slept in his crib or was in the other room or, swinging in the baby swing in the corner. And it worked out well. And the other thing I had decided to do was start a business doing hair and makeup for weddings, which was perfect as a mom because I would do the practice runs on the brides in my little one-room salon in my house. And then on the weekends, I would go to the mountains of Colorado on location and do weddings and make a couple $1,000s while my husband was home with the baby. And that worked for several years. I really enjoyed it. It was a great little side gig. But by the time I was pregnant with my second son, My husband was starting to travel internationally for his job. So I was juggling this business, a toddler, and being pregnant. And as you can imagine, it was stressful. Brides are stressful. Having a toddler is stressful. But then when your husband is gone all the time, my immune system started to get low. And at 7 months pregnant with my second baby, I got the shingles. It was like on my belly. And my God, that's when I decided I needed to cut back on the hair. I still did a few brides, a few weddings after my second baby, but certainly not as many. The great thing about that business, though, is when I needed to, or when I felt like picking up a few weddings, I certainly could amp up my marketing and get back into that current wedding season. So by the time I had my second baby, I had two little boys. I decided to, kind of cut back on doing hair for a little bit. And then once they became toddlers, or the youngest one was a toddler, I did more weddings again. We moved into a nice big house. Things were going great. And then I discovered that my husband was having an affair. That man was cheating on me all the time throughout our entire relationship. But this affair was kind of like, you know what? I'm done. So I got divorced when my kids were 5 and 7. As a newly single mom, you know what I did? I decided I wanted to open a secondhand bridal boutique and put a salon in the back of it to do hair and makeup for weddings. Such a dumb idea. I mean, it's a great idea. It was dumb for me at the time. I had two little boys. I was a newly single mom. I had no business trying to start a brand new business. That business lasted for a year. And I remember the day I closed the business, turned in the keys, put everything in storage. I laid down and took a nap and thought, what am I going to do? I need to find a job. What am I going to do? And when I woke up from that nap, a voice clearly said to me, call Karen. Karen was a friend of mine, an acquaintance who had a little salon in Longmont, Colorado. And I thought, that's a great idea. I will call her up, ask her if I could use her chair part-time to do the clients that I have, and I can kind of continue, doing hair, and I can continue doing the wedding styling. And so I called her immediately, and she said, it is so crazy that you called me because I've decided to move to the East Coast and I need to sell my business. So I bought Karen's business. It was this little cottage in Old Town Longmont, and just the cutest, quaintest little space. And I inherited all of her clients. Karen and I were quite different from each other, so, not all of us clicked. I probably retained about 30% of her clientele, which was fine, which was great. As a mom of young boys, I had this space that allowed me flexibility. It allowed me income. That was 2011. And I grew my clientele in that space to be quite secure. It was the perfect situation for me. It was wonderful. The lady who owned the property ran a business out of the main house, which was like a healing center with acupuncturists and psychics and massage therapists. And then I had the little carriage house in the back. In, I think it was 2020, or maybe it was 2021, she decided to retire and she sold the business to somebody else. And that new owner said, yes, we will let you continue to do hair in the little cottage back there. But every 6 months, she would double my rent. I mean, she was trying to phase me out. So eventually, I decided to move my business into the house that I was living in. And I had this great space that was being used as a studio apartment, which I converted into a nice big hair salon. It was wonderful. And my kids were getting older. They graduated from high school. And man, this is a long time. This is about 35 years. So they graduated from high school. The pandemic had happened. They didn't know what they wanted to do with their lives. And I had always told them that I wanted to leave Longmont. I wanted to leave the state of Colorado. One of my sons was now 22 years old, and I wasn't really seeing him thriving and wanting to go out on his own. So I decided, this is probably a good time for me to get out of his way. So I decided I was going to move to Austin, Texas. My youngest son moved to Oregon. He had been doing this program called WWOOFing, Worldwide Opportunities in Organic Farming. He did a WWOOFing experience in Northern California by the Oregon border. Fell in love with Oregon. He also went to like England and Scotland, and so he moved to Oregon. My other son, who was 22, was basically smoking pot and playing video games and looked like Jesus and sweetest kid in the world, but he needed to find his path. So it put a little panic in him. Like, what am I going to do with myself? He moved in with his dad, which, I kind of knew that his dad was not gonna support him forever. He probably had a stronger backbone than I did, as far as, he's not going to be in his mother's basement because his mother lives in Austin, Texas. So that son joined the Army, and current day, he's doing so well. He's thriving in the Army. He's such a different person, and I'm so freaking proud of him. Here I am in Austin, Texas, which I love, starting all over, which is not easy, but it's all right. I'm having fun. And I also, a couple years ago, started doing comedy, which is a freaking blast. So, yeah, I've been doing hair for 35 years. Long story longer.